Howdy and welcome to the F1 Hatchet. This is the driver rating for the Australian GP. This was a strange race with the multiple red flags, so this will cause a little bit of discussion on the drivers' ratings on how they came out due to these red flags. As normal, we will start from the back of the field and work our way up. So without further ado, we will start off in Charles Leclerc in the last position. As you can see, I have the two gray numbers for the previous races and the average on the right. For Charles Leclerc, I gave a 5. He did have contact on the first corner, on the first lap of the race, knocking him out of the race, beaching that Ferrari off into that field, causing him to DNF. I couldn't give him much more than a 5 as he was just averagely pulling that Ferrari through the field, and due to that contact that he possibly could have avoided, knocked him out completely out of the race. Next is Alexander Albon, or Alex Albon. I gave a 3. He was doing really, really good, pulling that Williams through the field, and, qualifying fairly well off. But due to that, self-inflicted mistake and going into the corner of turn 6 a little hot, he skidded off and ended up into the barriers on the other side of the track, causing a safety car that then turned into a red flag, causing the first red flag of the season due to all of the gravel and debris that was thrown up onto the track. With the question is whether that red flag was valid or not. That is not for this discussion, but due to that, he knocked himself out of the race with that good position, so I had to drop him back into the field on that score of a 3. George Russell, I gave a 9. He was off on that second position, starting off the race just behind Max Verstappen, and was able to take over that first position from Max on the start of the race, doing a really good job, and then drop back into the field due to issues on the the decisions making on the pit lane due to that safety car that turned into issues, dropping him back. Not his fault. He was making his way back into the field, and then his engine cut off, dropping him out of the field with that DNF. So I gave him a 9 because he was doing a really good job and everything he could from that Mercedes. Kevin Magnussen, I gave a 3. He was doing pretty well, I guess, in the race, even though he didn't do that good in qualifying, but was out on his own, and he ended up just kissing that wall with his right rear tire that was enough to blow that tire and cause that secondary flag, knocking him out of the race. So I couldn't give them more than a 3 for having that self-inflicted wound. Logan Sargent, I gave a 4. He was pretty much out of most of the race, qualifying 18th, and then just didn't see much of him past that, even though he was, didn't cause an accident like his teammate. Nick DeVries, I gave a 5. It was an average race for him. He had a little bit of contact with Ocon on that first restart, but other than that, he was doing a fairly average race, but not where he needed to be in all of this turmoil. Esteban Ocon, I gave a 7. He was past Oscar for 11th on lap 27th and Yuki for 10th on lap 28th. He was working his way back into, the points running fairly well until his teammate took him out on that second red flag restart. Pierre Gasly, I gave a 6. Just had to drop him down from his teammate. He was doing pretty well like his teammate was, except on that second red flag restart. Trying to avoid some stuff, he was not paying attention to his rear view mirror and just kind of drifted over into his teammate, knocking both of those Alpines out of the race, dropping them back out of the points. So I had to give him a 6. Carlos Sainz was doing fairly good. He qualified 5th. Had passed Hulkenberg for 7th on lap 14, Stroll on lap for 6th on lap 15th, Gasly for 4th on lap 25, but ended up getting that 5-second penalty for hitting Alonso on that second restart, causing that 5-second penalty, dropped him back because of the grouping of the field. He had no choice but to be dropped. That pack was so close, he had no choice. So because of that one mistake, he was able to push back, so I ended up having to give him a 6. Valtteri Bottas, didn't see much from him at all. He qualified fairly poorly and ended up in 19th for qualifying, but stayed out of trouble during this race and worked his way back up without too much issues or any kind of camera action. Gave him a 6. That finishes the bottom 10. Now we go to the top 10. Yuki Tsunoda, he passed Norris for 9th early on, but just finished inside the points because of the turmoil. I ended up giving him a 6 on that AlphaTauri. Juan Zhou, I gave a 7. He was fairly poorly start, but worked his way back up into the field during the race. So I ended up giving him a 7 with that Alfa Romero, showing what he can do above his teammate. Oscar Piastri gave a 7. He was fairly good. He got 3 places on the very start of the race and worked his way out, staying out of trouble. So I gave a 7. Nico Hülkenberg, he qualified 10th, was up to 4th at one point before the reorder after the second red flag. So he could have been potentially on the podium with that 5-second penalty for Carlos. But due to that reorder, he dropped back down to 7th. Overall, a really good running for that Haas and showing what he can do besides his teammate. So I gave it a 9. Lando Norris passed Yuki for 9th and passed Hülkenberg for 8th on lap 52, getting that McLaren up there in that 6th position, mainly due to the Alpines dropping out, but doing pretty much all he could with that McLaren, so I gave him an 8. Sergio Perez, he started off in 20th position due to running off the track in qualifying 1. So he started at the pit lane for this race, worked his way back up to 5th after those Alpines dropped out. He was doing some really good passing action on turn 9, where he passed Ocon on lap 22, Oscar on lap 23, and Norris on lap 44 in that corner, which is a high-speed corner, which is not normally seen for those passing. So he was doing a really good job. Got driver of the day as well, but I only could give him a 9 because of that qualifying issue, having to make him work back through the field. Imagine if he was up there in that qualifying position, what he could have done. Lance Stroll, I gave an 8. He had contact with Carlos on lap 1, knocking Carlos out, so I dropped down a little bit of points. But other than that, he did a fantastic job in that Aston Martin. So I gave him an 8. Fernando Alonso, I gave just behind him because of that contact with Carlos on that second restart, knocking him out. He basically stayed in that nice position where he could run, but he wasn't fantastic like we've seen him in the past. So I gave him a 7. Lewis Hamilton, I ended up giving a 9, almost a perfect score, but he started in that 3rd position, was able to take that 2nd position from Max after George had passed Max. He did an excellent job on that first red flag restart, where he kept Max behind him, but was not able to keep him for long due to that Red Bull's performance. So he went back to 2nd and basically maintained that position in all of the turmoil and kept it out of trouble. So I gave him a 9, getting everything he possibly could out of that Mercedes, except not quite as well as his teammate. So if his teammate was in, possibly he would have been dropped down to 3rd. Then we come to Max Verstappen in that first position. I gave an 8, mainly because of 2 mistakes. He started off on the very start where he dropped back to 3rd behind both Mercedes. And then once he did take the lead, he ended up having a wide turn, not quite managing that Red Bull like he should have been doing. I'm not sure if it was a lack of concentration or if it was just brakes, like what he said on the radio, locking up a little harder than he was expecting him to. But due to that off, he could have actually gone off and beached the car or hit the wall, which would have dropped him completely out of this race. So I had to give him knock a point off there, even though he was ahead enough to keep that first position and manage that first position all the way through. So he only gets an 8. So that wraps up the driver rating for the Australian GP for Albert Park. We will see you later. And if you made it this far, if you could like the video, and if you'd like to see more of these, please subscribe. Thank you very much, and we'll see you on the grid.